The rain hammered against the thin tin roof of the orphanage, turning the small, dimly lit room into a cold, dreary cage. Clara, barely 18, hugged herself tightly, her knuckles white against her worn coat. The last few months had been unbearable, a constant cycle of hunger, rejection, and harsh whispers from the orphanage staff. She had never known her parents, and now, the only family she thought she might have was gone, swept away by cruel circumstances and the cruel stepmother who claimed to be a distant relative. The room smelled of damp blankets and the faint bitterness of unwashed walls. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows, but inside, Clara's heart howled louder. She had dreams, small ones, like having a warm meal tonight. Or maybe someday, a real home, where she would be safe and loved. But the world seemed determined to crush every spark of hope she clutched. It was then that Mrs. Cartwright, her stepmother in distant relation, appeared, her expensive umbrella dripping rainwater onto the floor. Clara looked up, her eyes wary, expecting the usual scolding or indifference. But Mrs. Cartwright's smile was sharp, almost predatory, her eyes glinting with a calculated coldness. "Clara," she said, her voice honeyed but edged with steel, "I have a proposal for you." She leaned down, her perfume wafting into Clara's nose, overpowering and suffocating. "There's a man, well, let's just say he's not wealthy, but he's kind and lonely. He's looking for someone to take care of him, someone to love him. And I think you're the perfect girl for him." Clara's heart skipped. Love, care. It sounded like a dream she wasn't allowed to have, but the caution in her gut screamed louder. "Why me?" she asked, voice trembling with a mix of hope and fear. "Why would anyone want me?" Mrs. Cartwright's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're young, obedient, and desperate enough to grasp the chance when it comes. It's an opportunity, Clara. A chance to escape this place. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" She let the words linger, sweet as poison, as she turned to leave, leaving a crisp envelope on the small wooden table. "He's waiting for you tomorrow." Dressed nicely, the following day, Clara stood at the edge of the cobblestone street, clutching the envelope as if it contained the key to her freedom. The man, she was told, lived in a small, shabby apartment nearby. She peered down the street and saw him, a thin, disheveled figure, sitting on a wooden crate with a tattered blanket draped over his shoulders. His eyes were tired, yet there was something in them, a quiet dignity, a gentleness that caught her breath. "I'm Clara," she whispered, unsure of how to approach him. He looked up, his face lighting up with a shy smile that was oddly disarming. "Hello, I'm Adrian," he replied softly. "Are you here because of her?" He nodded toward Mrs. Cartwright, who lingered at a distance. Her smile hidden beneath the brim of her expensive hat. Clara hesitated. The promise of escape was sweet, but something in Adrian's eyes told her there was more than met the eye. He didn't seem desperate, nor cruel, and certainly not the man she had been led to believe, a helpless, dependent figure waiting for pity. Instead, there was strength in his posture, a quiet command in the way he observed the world. Over the next few days, Clara and Adrian spent time together. They walked along the rainy streets of the city, sharing small meals from the corner bakery, laughing awkwardly at shared jokes, and speaking of dreams, too fragile to speak aloud in front of others. Clara felt warmth she hadn't known in years, a sense of safety, of belonging. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had stumbled upon someone genuine in a world full of deceit. Yet, every evening, Mrs. Cartwright loomed in the background, reminding her of the transaction she thought she had agreed to. "Remember, Clara," she would say, voice laced with sugar and steel. "Your happiness depends on how well you please him. Don't forget why you're here." Clara's stomach churned, caught between fear and anticipation, unsure if she was playing a role in her own salvation or falling into a trap far worse than her current misery. One evening, as the sunset turned the city orange and pink, Adrian confided a secret. "I don't have much," he said, voice low, "but I believe that kindness, it's more important than money, more important than appearances. I've lived on the streets, survived the cold, been ignored and forgotten. But I've also learned that the smallest act of goodness can change everything. Clara's heart swelled. For the first time in years, she felt hope that wasn't tainted by manipulation or lies. She wanted to trust him, to believe in the life he promised. And yet, a small voice inside her whispered caution. The luxurious lifestyle of Mrs. Cartwright and the promise of a wealthy escape had always seemed like the only door out. Was she ready to step through another, more uncertain door? Days turned into weeks, and Clara noticed subtle clues the way Adrian moved through spaces with an unassuming authority. The respect he commanded from people who seemed to notice him, as if he carried an invisible weight of importance. There were moments when she caught a glimpse of something glittering beneath the tattered clothes he wore. A richness in manner, a quiet confidence that couldn't be faked, and in her heart, suspicion grew. Mingled with excitement, then came the evening that would change everything. Mrs. Cartwright invited Clara to a small dinner, ostensibly to meet Adrian's family. The table was modest, the room dim, but the tension was palpable. Mrs. Cartwright's eyes sparkled with anticipation, clearly expecting Clara to falter, to feel trapped, to plead for escape. But Clara's attention was elsewhere, focused on Adrian, who greeted the guests with calm dignity. His every word and gesture, measured yet effortlessly charming. As the evening unfolded, Clara realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. Adrian was no homeless man, no pitiable figure, as Mrs. Cartwright had led her to believe. Beneath the guise of simplicity, there was wealth, confidence, and influence. But he chose to live humbly, valuing integrity and kindness above all else. The realization hit Clara like lightning. She had been led into a situation designed to manipulate her, but Adrian's heart had remained untouchable by greed or deception. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with a strange exhilaration. The life she thought she was stepping into, dictated by the stepmother's schemes, was not the life she was actually entering. She was on the cusp of discovering a truth that would upend everything she had believed about people, power, and kindness. And in that revelation, for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The morning sun filtered through the dusty curtains of Adrian's modest apartment, painting golden streaks across the worn wooden floor. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, a cup of steaming coffee warming her hands. Her mind still buzzing from the revelations of the previous night. She had always imagined a life defined by wealth, by lavish dresses and grand houses, yet here she was, in a small, cozy space that smelled faintly of old books and fresh bread, feeling more at home than she ever had in her dreams. Adrian moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, humming a soft tune under his breath, preparing breakfast as if the world beyond these walls didn't exist. Clara watched him, her curiosity mingled with awe. Every small gesture, the way he cracked eggs, poured milk, or brushed crumbs from the counter, carried a sense of dignity that no money could buy. It was in these moments she realized that he had been rich all along, not in gold or jewels, but in character, in integrity, in the warmth he exuded without pretense. "Clara," he said, setting the plates on the table, "you don't have to stay just because of what she told you. You're here because you want to be, because you see what life could be, beyond fear and manipulation." His voice was gentle, yet it held an undeniable strength, a quiet command that made her heart skip. She looked at him, searching for hidden motives, expecting the deception that had marked her past, but there was none. Only sincerity, only a man who had lived hardships but refused to let bitterness define him. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice shaking with emotion. "I've never had someone care like this before." He smiled, a small curve of his lips that seemed to illuminate the entire room. "Then say nothing. Just be here. Let the rest of the world wait." Days passed, and Clara settled into a rhythm with Adrian, discovering a life she had never dared to imagine. They walked through the city streets hand in hand, laughing at the oddities of life, sharing dreams, and learning about one another. She learned that he had chosen to live simply, despite having inherited a fortune from a family no one truly understood. A legacy of wealth he had never sought, but had accepted with humility. He cared nothing for the grandeur of mansions or flashy cars. He valued kindness, respect, and the quiet beauty of everyday moments. Yet the shadow of Mrs. Cartwright lingered, a persistent reminder that Clara's life had always been a pawn in someone else's game. She couldn't shake the memory of the envelope she had found in the orphanage. The way the stepmother's words had dripped with manipulation and greed. A part of her feared that even now she might be caught in another trap, another scheme she couldn't yet see. Her fears were confirmed. One afternoon, when Mrs. Cartwright appeared at the apartment, her expensive heels clicking against the wooden floor. Her eyes glittered with the same cold calculation as before, but there was an edge of desperation this time. "Clara," she said, voice deceptively sweet, "you've been spending far too much time with him. I didn't bring you here to fall in love with a man you can't control." Clara's pulse quickened, but she didn't move. She felt a surge of courage, a sense of the life she was slowly building with Adrian giving her strength. "Control?" she asked, raising her chin. "I'm not here for control. I'm here because I chose to be, because I finally found someone who treats me with respect." Mrs. Cartwright's smile faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation. "You don't know what you're saying. That man, he's nothing. You're wasting your chance at security, at a proper life." Adrian stepped forward, his presence commanding without force. "She knows exactly what she's saying," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Clara doesn't need your permission to live her life. And she certainly doesn't need your We decide our paths ourselves." Clara felt a rush of relief and pride. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was asserting herself, claiming the life she deserved. Mrs. Cartwright's eyes narrowed, realizing that her plans were unraveling, that the girl she had tried to manipulate had discovered her own power. The days that followed were a mixture of discovery and revelation. Clara learned more about Adrian's life, the hardships he had endured, and the quiet generosity that had defined him for years. He gave to those in need, helped the homeless, and supported struggling families, all while living modestly, blending into the world without fanfare. Clara realized that his wealth had never been the point. It was the heart beneath the exterior that mattered, the kindness that had survived every trial. One evening, as they walked through the park, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Adrian stopped and looked at her, his eyes soft and unwavering. "Clara, I never wanted to deceive you, and I never will. But I also wanted you to see the world without illusions, without the chains of greed and manipulation. I wanted you to choose me, not because of what I have, but because of who I am." Clara's eyes welled with tears. She had spent her life believing that happiness came from escape, from wealth, from someone else's generosity. But now she understood. True happiness came from trust, respect, and shared dreams. She had been tested, tempted, and challenged. But in the process, she had found someone who valued her for her heart, not her circumstances. The days turned into weeks, and Clara and Adrian's bond deepened. The city around them continued to bustle, oblivious to the quiet revolution of their lives. And through it all, Clara felt a strength she had never known, a resilience born of hardship, a courage forged in the fires of manipulation and deceit. She had learned to trust, to hope, and to love, and in doing so, she had discovered the life she had always dreamed of. Hidden in plain sight, and somewhere in the shadows, Mrs. Cartwright realized that her schemes had failed, that the girl she had underestimated had not only survived, but had thrived, and that the man she had tried to diminish had chosen love and integrity over wealth and power. The quiet triumph of their bond was a lesson in itself, that true worth could never be manipulated or bought, and that kindness, honesty, and heart always found their way. Autumn had arrived in the city, painting the streets with amber leaves and crisp air that carried the faint scent of rain. Clara and Adrian walked side by side through the park, their hands brushing occasionally, a subtle warmth passing between them with every touch. Life had settled into a rhythm of shared laughter, quiet dinners, and conversations that stretched into the night. Yet, beneath the surface, a storm was quietly brewing, one that neither of them could ignore. Clara's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone buzzing. She glanced down to see a message from the orphanage director, a voice she had trusted for years. The words were brief but urgent. Clara, you need to come. There's something important you must see. Her heart tightened. Something about the phrasing sent a shiver down her spine. Adrian noticed immediately. What is it? He asked, concern lacing his tone. I don't know yet, she admitted, slipping her phone into her coat pocket. But I need to go. Adrian took her hand, his grip firm. We face it together. Whatever it is, we'll handle it. When they arrived at the orphanage, the air felt thick with tension. The director led them to a small office where a man in a crisp suit waited, his expression unreadable. Clara recognized him immediately. Mr. Whitaker, an attorney who had been handling matters related to her late parents' estate. Clara, Adrian, he began, thank you for coming so quickly. There's been a development regarding your father's will. He handed her a sealed envelope. Clara's hands trembled as she took it, the paper heavier than she expected, as if it carried the weight of her entire past. She opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, written in her father's unmistakable hand. His words were deliberate, filled with wisdom and foresight. A message that seemed to leap off the page. Clara, my dear, life will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Trust in your heart, and choose those who value your soul over your circumstances. You will find the path to true happiness, not in wealth, but in integrity and love. Father. Clara's eyes welled with tears. She turned to Adrian, her voice barely a whisper. He knew everything I would go through. Adrian pulled her into a gentle embrace. He always had faith in you, Clara, and so do I. But the moment of peace was short-lived. Mrs. Cartwright had not given up. Word of Clara's newfound inheritance and her growing connection with Adrian had reached her ears. She arrived at the orphanage that evening, her presence sharp and demanding, like a shadow that refused to fade. Clara, she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I see your luck is changing. But do you really think you can escape the life I've planned for you? Clara felt a surge of anger and courage. She had spent years feeling powerless, manipulated by those who sought to control her destiny. But now, with Adrian by her side and the truth of her father's love and guidance in her hands, she felt untouchable. You no longer get to decide my life, Clara said firmly. I choose my path. I choose love, honesty, and respect, and I will not let your schemes define me. Mrs. Cartwright's smile faltered, replaced by a glare that could cut through steel. She realized that the girl she had tried to manipulate had grown into a woman of resilience, someone who could no longer be swayed by fear or greed. The confrontation escalated into a tense exchange of words, each syllable carrying the weight of years of betrayal and manipulation. But then, unexpectedly, Adrian stepped forward, his presence calm but commanding. Clara doesn't need anyone's approval to live her life, he said. And neither do I. We are the sum of our choices, not the machinations of others. Mrs. Cartwright's eyes narrowed, realizing her power had evaporated. She left without another word, her plan in ruins. While Clara and Adrian stood together, their bond stronger than ever. In the days that followed, Clara's life shifted in ways she had never anticipated. Her inheritance, modest as it was, compared to Adrian's fortune, provided her with stability and the means to help others who had faced struggles similar to her own. She donated to the orphanage, ensuring that children like herself would have a chance at a future unshaped by cruelty or neglect. Adrian and Clara's relationship blossomed amidst this new chapter of life. They shared quiet mornings making breakfast, evenings reading by the fireplace, and weekends exploring the city, discovering small joys that money could never buy. Clara realized that happiness wasn't in the grandeur she had once imagined, but in the simplicity of a shared smile, a gentle touch, and the knowledge that someone truly cared for her heart. One evening, as they walked along the river, watching the reflections of the city lights dance on the water, Adrian stopped and turned to Clara. You've grown so much, Clara, he said softly. Stronger than I ever imagined. Your courage, your resilience. It's inspiring. Clara smiled, her eyes shining with tears of gratitude. I couldn't have done it alone, she admitted. I had your support and my father's guidance. I've learned that life isn't about what you're given, but what you choose to do with it. As the night deepened, they sat on a bench, hands intertwined, watching the world move around them. Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known, a certainty that her life, though shaped by hardship, was finally hers to embrace. And in Adrian's steady presence, she found a love that was patient, kind, and unwavering, a love that no scheme or deception could ever touch. In the quiet of that night, Clara understood the true lesson of her journey, that integrity, courage, and heart were worth more than any inheritance, any scheme, any wealth, and that the life she had once feared she'd never have was now unfolding before her eyes, not through manipulation or luck, but through the choices she made and the love she had earned. Winter had settled over the city, the streets glistening with frost, and a crisp chill in the air that made every breath visible. Clara and Adrian walked side by side, their scarves wrapped tightly, their hands clasped as though they were holding onto each other against more than just the cold. The past months had been a whirlwind of revelations, confrontations, and personal triumphs, but tonight felt different. Tonight, everything would come full circle. Clara's phone buzzed unexpectedly. She glanced down to see a message from the orphanage director. "Clara, something's happening tonight. You need to come immediately." Her heart skipped a beat. She turned to Adrian, who gave her a reassuring nod. "We face it together," he said. The same words that had carried them through past storms. When they arrived, the atmosphere was charged. A crowd had gathered, whispering and exchanging hurried glances. At the center stood Mrs. Cartwright, her face masked with an air of authority that had long since lost its power over Clara. Beside her, a man Clara didn't recognize stepped forward, someone from her father's legal team, holding a stack of documents. "Clara," the man began, "these documents confirm the final execution of your father's will and estate. There have been attempts to undermine it, but the law recognizes the truth. Your father's wishes are to be honored fully." A hush fell over the crowd. Clara felt a rush of relief, but also an unexpected sense of satisfaction. The weight of uncertainty that had haunted her for years was finally lifting. Mrs. Cartwright's expression faltered, her confidence wavering as the legal reality became undeniable. "You see," the attorney continued, "Clara has been granted not only her rightful inheritance, but also the authority to make decisions regarding the orphanage and family trusts. Any attempts to interfere will be legally challenged." Clara stepped forward, her voice steady but carrying the gravity of years of struggle. "This isn't about wealth," she said. Looking directly at Mrs. Cartwright, "It's about integrity, love, and respect. I will live my life guided by these principles, and no one can take that away." Mrs. Cartwright opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had lost, not just in law, but in every moral and emotional sense. Her schemes, manipulations, and cruelty had been exposed, leaving her powerless. Clara felt no anger, only a calm vindication. The satisfaction of someone who had endured hardship, yet emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring admiration for Clara's composure and resilience. Adrian squeezed her hand, pride evident in his eyes. "You did it," he whispered. "You stood tall through everything, and now you're free." Clara looked out over the park. The cold air crisped against her cheeks, and allowed herself a small, grateful smile. The journey had been harrowing, filled with betrayal and doubt, but it had also revealed the depth of her own courage and the unwavering support of those who truly mattered. Adrian had been by her side, her father's words had guided her, and her own strength had carried her forward. In the weeks that followed, Clara's life transformed in tangible and profound ways. She took an active role in the orphanage, ensuring that children who had suffered the loss of family or home could find stability and love. She created programs for education, mentorship, and emotional support, determined that no child would ever feel as powerless as she once had. Adrian and Clara's relationship flourished in this environment of purpose and compassion. Together, they built a life grounded not in material wealth, but in shared values and mutual respect. Their love, tested by the trials of the past, was now a fortress against the uncertainties of the world. One evening, As they sat in the orphanage library helping children with homework, a young girl looked up at Clara with wide, hopeful eyes. "Will I ever get to do something great, like you?" she asked softly. Clara knelt beside her, taking her hands in hers. "You already are doing something great," she said gently. "Every choice you make, every act of kindness, every moment you show courage, that's greatness. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." Later, alone with Adrian, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. "I've learned that life doesn't hand out fairness," she said quietly, "but it does give us choices. And the right choices, guided by love and integrity, can change everything." Adrian kissed her forehead. "And you made the right ones, every time. That's why you're here, and that's why we have this life together." As winter deepened, the city lights reflected in the frost-covered windows, and Clara felt a sense of completeness she had never known. The struggles of the past, the humiliation, the manipulation, the fear, had forged her into someone unshakable. And in the presence of Adrian, the children she helped, and the life she had claimed on her own terms, she finally understood true happiness. The story of Clara was now one not of betrayal or loss, but of resilience, justice, and redemption. She had faced the harshest trials, yet emerged with her spirit intact, her heart open, and her life full of purpose. The lesson was clear and profound: no scheme, no malice. No obstacle could dim the light of a determined heart guided by love, integrity, and courage. In the quiet moments, as she looked out at the snow falling softly over the city, Clara felt her father's presence in every gentle drift, in every whisper of wind, and in every child's laughter that echoed through the orphanage halls. His legacy was not merely in the estate he had left, but in the values he had instilled and the life he had envisioned for her. And in that realization, Clara knew she was free, she was strong, and her story, shaped by trials but defined by triumph, would inspire generations to come. She and Adrian would continue to live not just for themselves, but for the countless lives they touched, proving that love, courage, and integrity were the greatest inheritance one could ever receive. As the screen of life faded to the gentle glow of hope, the narrator's voice lingered, echoing the moral of Clara's journey. True wealth is not counted in dollars, but in the courage to stand, the kindness to give, and the love that endures through every trial.